you taking time from your family to be with us this evening. And we do have quite a few questions that I think were sparked from our conversation previously. And so thank you again for being here. And we are really excited to continue in this dialogue with Every Neighborhood Partnership. So thank you again. So as we get started this morning, because I'm so used to saying morning.
It's the church auto response.
It is. It's the hazards of being a pastor, I think.
Yeah.
This evening, I thought we'd start off with kind of just some simple, fun questions to get us thinking about literacy. So when you think about literacy, what are some books or book series that you have heard about or maybe talked about in your trainings with folks that people say that kids resonate with?
Yeah, well, I am a dad of 4, so I have 4 boys, from a 9-year-old down to a 1-year-old. So this is like, my home is like a lab, right? Like this is like, not only do I work with kids and, EMP works with kids, but I have the best demo audience on these things. So one of the that they love, and one of the series I've actually, every year during Dr. Seuss's birthday, most of the schools will do some sort of like read across America. And I'll bring this series of books from Andrea Feil, or Beatty. I don't know exactly how to say that there. But she has a series where it features kids and their different amazing skills. So one is this gal, Ada Twist scientist. One's a future president. One's an engineer. One's an architect. They're really cute, and they really explore this 5th grade classroom and kids using their imagination and just the visions and the dreams. And I think it gives kids like a sense of like vision for where they could go in their life. And a lot of them talk about like trying and failing, and that's part of the process of life. And so I love that series. It's a really fun series. So I maybe if you guys could share that link there. That's a really good one. And on a faith-rooted side, Matthew Paul Turner has a really cool series where he does these books that are, talk about God's love for them and for the world. And then one of my neighbors, I've actually read, Ibram Kendi wrote a really good book called How to Be Anti-Racist. And I know that's one of the topics you all are talking through, and just about race and injustice. And he has a baby book called How to Anti-Racist Baby. And one of my neighbors is like we have a little free library, and she bought like 6 or 7 of them and put one into put 5 of them in our little free library and gave us one for our kid. And so I think that it helps start a conversation early on about what does it mean to pursue justice, and then I can talk to my kids about God's heart for justice. So that's a wide range of like answer, but yeah, I love books, and there's a lot of really good stuff out there.
So to kind of follow up on that question, if we were targeting, say, 2nd grade or 3rd grade, because we were talking a little bit about it earlier today about kind of the important milestone really being about around 3rd grade and trying to get kids up to that 3rd grade reading level. And that's really an indicator for future. If there was one book that we as a community that could put in the hand of every 3rd grader in the Valley, what would probably be one of your highest recommendations? I know that's a hard question because there's thousands of books out there, but
that is such a hard. That is a very hard one. I'm gonna have to get back to you.
That's good.
EMP actually has. I'll try and find it while we're on the call. EMP actually has a book list that we did create. So I think it's on our literacy website, and it actually is like targeted by grade level. So it's books that we would love, that your volunteers actually have probably used and read with kids in the classroom.
Okay.
So we actually have a reading list, a book list, in case anybody wants to buy those. So let me try and find that while we're on the call, and then I'll share that.
Well, that's great. But it's helpful to know, though, that at least you guys have you've already started doing some of that work for us. So if we can find, if we do look for that information, there is a resource guide out there that kind of gives those kind of key books for different grade levels. So that's great.
Well, it's one of those things where with kids, right, you want the goal to be, they need to stretch, right? There needs to be some new words for them. But if it's so difficult, they're going to feel defeated. So
Right.
you're always trying to find that like right amount, right level. It's like the Three Bears, like you just want that just right kind of spot for them, because you don't want to push them too hard or else they feel defeated, and you don't
Right.
want something easy where it's just they're breezing. So
They're memorizing them and then keep
Exactly.
repeating them.
Yep.
Along those lines, we did actually have a couple of questions that they're around the free libraries. There were several people who were interested in how to acquire possibly a little free library for their neighborhood.
Mhm.
And I do know that you have a map of where some of them are located. The question really was, how could they get a free library, maybe from E&P, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think as I mentioned, we've gotten a couple hundred from the Fresno Bee. Those have already all been allocated, unfortunately, at this stage. We may do another round here in the future, but there's like there's a couple good ways I would go about it. One is somebody at University Press, I assume, and I know this is true, somebody's really good at woodworking, right?
Yes,
like you have assets at the church, and you have somebody that has time, they have a skill saw, a table saw, like they already have the skills. So there's somebody there that I know has those skills. The other option is you could buy one. So Etsy or the littlefreelibrary.org, they have a shop and you could buy one from them. So at this stage, EMP doesn't have any that are like unallocated, but that would totally be what I'd recommend.
That's helpful. At least it gives people kind of an idea as to, if they're not necessarily going to go out and build it themselves, there is an option through either Etsy or through that other organization.
And then the Little Free Library even has, so when you go to the build on their website, they actually have I think 5 or 10 different plans. So you don't even have to make up the resource that's already there.
Here's a question kind of, again, still along the lines of just actual books. Do you guys have books that you give out and donate, or we're getting ready to do a trunk or treat and we were thinking, hey, wouldn't it be interesting to give out a book with candy? Where might we go to get or partner with maybe somebody who has extra books to give, or maybe some cheap places that we might be able to use some of our mission giving to purchase some? What would be your suggestion about that?
That's great. That'd be great. So we partner with Reading Heart. And Reading Heart was launched by an 8-year-old, sorry, not even 8th grader, 8-year-old. And her goal was to give a book to every kid in Fresno. So I think it's readingheart.org. They're the ones we actually partner with for the book bins or the little free libraries. And they have a warehouse full of books. Over COVID, one of the things we did with them is a lot of the church buildings were not being used right. So at the Well and at People's, volunteers sorted over 400,000 books during COVID season. They wrapped it up before churches started doing some services. But so we sorted 400,000 books. So we have some books that we could hook you up with. They would come from Reading Heart. And then they would be in boxes based on 1st to 3rd, 4th to 6th, and then, high school adult kind of books. So, but yeah, we could totally work that out. As you guys have your event, just, get in touch with me, and, we want 20 boxes or, whatever that number you think is. Yeah.
Oh, well, hey, I think in our interview, we talked a little bit about, the free book at Halloween and, like the dentist giving out the free toothbrush. But hey, I think in this case, it would be a very important giveaway and not just candy. So that might be.
Well, and what Reading Heart's been doing, and what you all could do as well, is they just prepackage them, right? So you put one from each box or something like that in a bag. That way, not all the kids are touching it, and you would limit some of the exposure elements there. But then they would just go, they get a bag, and they go.
That's awesome. Well, I think we'll have to follow up with that one, because that did come from one of our mission folks. So I think that might be an interest there.
Yeah.
So obviously we're talking primarily about literacy and focusing on literacy. So we do have a couple of questions kind of around literacy itself. You mentioned you have 55 schools that have literacy tutors currently, correct?
That is 55 schools that
Schools.
EMP is engaged with.
And
So
EMP
I
is
think
engaged with.
I think
Okay.
last year it was like 24, 27 different schools.
Okay.
That's mostly Fresno, Clovis. Those are a couple outlier schools, but they're in the 20s with literacy.
Okay. And so in your partnership and in your work with these schools, have you begun to collect any kind of data regarding the reading and the growth that has been happening through these reading programs? And from the tutors, have you seen some concrete data around that? Or I mean, I know we talked a little bit about some of the anecdotal stuff, but there was a question about have you seen kind of that data around the growth of children's reading when they're partnered with a mentor?
Yeah, so we have, and we've had a couple meetings with Fresno Unified to get more details, but in short, we have seen a 300 to 400% increase in a kid's sight word acquisition with our literacy mentors. We want to start doing some blind or some trials where we're working with an untested population, and we are not. What does it look like if they're not treated, right? Like what if they didn't get literacy mentors? What does that look like? And then obviously we recognize that not all that growth is our growth. Like a kid is just a sponge. And the teacher, could be doing a really fantastic job as well, right? So we're a support to what is going. But from where a kid starts in August, September, as we do our initial intake, and then by May, there's it's in that like 350% increase in their sight word acquisition.
Wow, that's incredible to consider. Yeah. Have you done kind of a follow-up? Because you've been in some of these schools for multiple years, and have you seen anything from like the kid who started in kindergarten through his or her experience through third grade? Have you seen some of that other growth as well, or do you know a little bit more about that kind of growth? Or again, maybe it's more anecdotal at this point, but have you seen or what kind of results have that been?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, I think we're not tracking those kids, right? Yeah, so that's a whole nother process. That would take like a research team to help us. If you are doing research,
there you go. Hey, we've got a doctoral program for you, right?
Yeah, totally. But so the teachers, as we go into a classroom, right, there's 20, 25 kids. We sit down with the teacher and we say, who are the kids you feel like need the most support? And they're going to give us typically their 5 to 8 lowest students. And those students are struggling from a variety of reasons and ways. And so what we see over and over and over is just the confidence building and the comfortability that the students have to say, like, I'm important. I get the special volunteer that comes into the classroom and works with me. Instead of like the punishment, like go back there and kind of be relegated. It's actually like the special visitor comes and sits with me, spends time with me. So we hear it and see it more throughout the year that the students, the teacher will observe and say, "Man, so and so is doing really well," and really feel like your investment in them matters.
That's awesome. You mentioned in our interview time together that mostly Hispanic kids are being served by ENP. Is that true? And if so, why do you think some of the other groups are less represented?
Say that question one more time.
You mentioned mostly Hispanic kids are being served by ENP. Is that true? And if so, do you know why maybe some of the other minority groups or Caucasian groups might be less represented?
Yeah, really. I mean, it's a function of the demographics of Fresno Unified. It's a function of the demographics of south of Shaw, south of Bullard. And what has happened in our city in terms of, what the term people often use is like white flight, that a lot of folks moved out of the urban southern areas of our city and moved to North Fresno or to Clovis. So in some of the schools we work at, it's 80, 90% Hispanic. And even if it's not that high, maybe it's in the 60s to 70s, 20% Black, 10% Asian, 10% white. And Fresno Unified as a whole, I think it's about 12% white. And so it's just it's a minority of the population. So it's a majority underrepresented population. Yeah.
And really kind of a demographically representative of where the schools are and this population that the school is providing for.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. In terms of those folks that we have begun to, say somebody is a literacy mentor, how can we practically continue to develop relationships with families maybe during COVID and after COVID? How has that happened? It seems like some of it would be very natural, but others, it might not be, but there might be a desire to continue to help these kids and these families. What might be some practical ways that could be done?
Yeah, that's really good. We're really thinking for the long term, right? So what are the ways to build natural connections and support? And so, you have to find those kind of third spaces or create the space really intentionally. So being on campus regularly or setting up being there when a kid is being dropped off or picked up, being part of a parent group, actually intersecting the campus life and the campus space is one way to do it, right? The other way is to think about what are the spaces where these families live. And so I know there's several apartment complexes around, UPC. So is it intersecting those physical spaces and continuing to be on campus? I know there's a ministry, Care Fresno, that they will take up an apartment at an apartment complex, and they'll do the programming in there. And are there folks that could intentionally move from the church to that apartment complex and invest there? What are the ways you obviously you guys are doing you have a food ministry. So what are the ways to make that a relational space? Yeah. So I think it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of let's give this 6 months or a year of investment and see if it's fruitful, and then also just being invested for the long haul. And so it's deep relational ministry that takes commitment and investment. So sometimes we have that vision and sometimes we just want a quick result. And so, how do you continue to do that? That's a really good question.
Yeah. It almost seems twofold in the sense that there are some very practical things that we could do, in the immediacy, getting books, putting books in kids' hands, getting little free libraries in neighborhoods. It's the longer piece that takes time to cultivate and to earn somebody's trust and to be present with someone in such a way that they feel comfortable and confident that you're there for the right reasons and you're there to be with them and not to get just something out of it for yourself kind of thing. So it's almost like a twofold process.
And it's small, right? It's two families. It's not, you're not going to change the entire zip code or the entire neighborhood, deep relational ministry is slow. And you feel like it's often one step forward, two steps back, but then you look back 10 years later and you go, this family's life is different. They know Jesus, they have community. We're seeing their kid now go off to high school and to college. We've seen churches do that where they're invested, and now they watch a whole generation go to college and have a new future that it wasn't a shot in the dark or, wasn't something they just developed overnight.
Right. It does. It takes time. So I think sometimes maybe we as individuals feel as if we're going to make a difference, it needs to be on a grander scale than on the smaller scale. But that's a great reminder for us that, it's reaching out to one or two people and making that relationship and establishing it and being mindful versus worrying about saving the entire elementary school all at the same time kind of thing. So we did have a follow-up kind of practical question about online literacy mentors. Can somebody continue to get involved? And if so, is there another training coming up or is it just we just sign up and you tell us where to go and we start kind of things? It's kind of the practical part about the literacy mentoring program.
Yeah, we are doing online trainings. So the space we're in now is all virtual, right? So we have a hope and we have a sense that Fresno Unified will come back in this spring, at least in a cohort model, if not fully online. We don't know for sure yet. But right now we're doing virtual literacy mentoring. So we do a 2-hour training where we'll walk you, get online, so it'll be over Zoom, and then we'll walk you through the virtual platform and how that's working. So we'll give you all the tools, all the training, set you up. And then most of our trainings, what we're trying to do is partner a volunteer from a church with a Fresno State student. And that also then is like, now you have a 3-way mentoring kind of going on, right? Like you have your often more seasoned church volunteer, and you have a college student, and then you have a little, first grader or second grader. So these are all families that have said, I want my kid to have a mentor, and I want that support. So they're logging in outside of their school hours, right? This is after kind of class ins for Fresno. And they're logging in to do some tutoring.
Is that normal? Is it normal protocol then for parents to give the permission, even if you were on site? Would the parents have to give permission for the mentorship? Is just because of the online nature of it?
Yeah, so this is like a whole new space. I mean, you think about it, like you're literally coming into their home,
right?
And so it's been. In one sense, it's been a challenge because it's not like they're not a captive audience. We have to go through a lot more hoops to get the kids locked in. But in another way, like these are parents that are dead set on their kids having extra support. And so we had a mom, didn't speak English, and she's like, I want my kid to get this tutoring. And so we spent 45 minutes just trying to get them all connected and online. Wow. But she didn't have the tech skills to do it. So EMP is also starting to talk about how can we do some digital literacy training for our parents. That's a side conversation, but we're just learning, like a lot of our parents don't have an email, don't know how to get on email. Yep. How do they get access to this kind of stuff, right? So, So all that to say, for your literacy inventors, I'll get on. I posted a link there in the chat, so if you guys can share that. Go to our website. You just sign up for a time. We'll get you connected.
Great. And kind of a subsequent follow-up in terms of literacy and mentoring. There was a question that came in about, have you partnered with Fresno Adult School or with Fresno County Library for adult literacy needs? Has that been something you've started or thought about, or a question that you're considering for the future?
Yeah, that's really good. We have never reached out to the adult school, so that'd be interesting to see. We have actually partnered with the library. Okay. So we're part of an initiative called Read Fresno. EMP actually started it with a bunch of partners that were all kind of in the literacy space, right? We're doing either tutoring, we're doing some level of literacy. We did a conference last January at First Press hosted us, and it was all for literacy, kind of, we called it Read Fresno. So we've gotten to know the library, and we sent some of our volunteers to work with them last summer. Okay. And so that's been a partnership. Their program's very different. They do a lot of like story time, and then as kids come in or adults come in, they'll do like some tutoring, but it's not as like structured. So so they're a great partner.
That's awesome. Oh, that's great to know. So that's another good resource then. Read Fresno is another.
readfresno.org. So
Fresno.org. Okay.
EMP needs to do a little bit more work on the website, but that's a website we're slowly getting up and running. But those are all partners that we're trying to just stay connected with. Ren, I see Pastor Ren put a question there, and I think that even kind of goes to our philosophy. Is like EMP started a collaborative called Read Fresno because we're doing this one segment of literacy development and support in our city, and there are a ton of other organizations that are doing different work, and we just frankly believe that we're better as we work together, even if we're competitors in the sense of like teaching fellows and hands-on and Care Fresno and Reading Heart and the library. Like, we're all trying to do literacy, but like if we shared resources, if we shared connection, so we did that conference, right? And it was fantastic because everybody kind of did a breakout, and then our volunteers got to hear from a different perspective. They got different resources, and we together are doing a collective lift in our city instead of like trying to beat compete against one another. And so I think that's part of EMP's philosophy, is that partnership really matters.
Yeah.
And partnership is the foundation for like what I think the kingdom is, right? The kingdom
Right.
is one of like unity amidst diversity. And
Right.
so if we can model that, that's, I think, a good win for our community.
We all have different gifts that we can bring, and different niches and things like that we can contribute to that overall health and wholeness of a community, versus, this is my territory, this is your territory, and neither the twain shall meet. But I think that's really a great philosophy, and for having, because I think the more we are a community as a whole, the more our children and our youth especially feel like they are part of a greater community, and they're not as, bifurcated or isolated or anything like that. And I think that's a really awesome representation of, I think, the ultimate goal, right? Is for us to be unified in our diversity, right? So that's awesome. You and I were talking a little bit before we got on about your big Fall in Love with Fresno and event that happened just a couple of days ago. So tell us a little bit more about Fall in Love with Fresno. And you just spoke a little bit about your overall philosophy about partnership and stuff like this, but give us a little bit of a taste of the Fall in Love with Fresno, because I think that's a great way for us to consider being a part of this community. It's to fall in love with it again.
Totally. Well, I come from Bakersfield, like that's where I was born, and there through high school. And when I came to Fresno, like Bakersfield's the armpit of the valley of the California, and Fresno, who knows where, but definitely came to Fresno thinking like, oh, this is a way better city than Bakersfield, and then was met with like a really strong sense of like, well, we can't wait to leave. We're going to go to, Oakland, LA, Portland, New York, Chicago. We're going to get out to a way better city. And Fresno has its challenges for sure, right? Like we all know the reports and some of the data we see. But we want to cultivate a love for our place. And I think even, right, it's like the prophet's challenge to the people of Israel. Like, you're in a foreign land. Yep. We are foreigners here in Fresno as the people of God. Fall in love with this place, and have kids, invest, like build homes. Your flourishing will happen when you invest in the flourishing of your community. So we don't come to take from Fresno; we come to invest, and we come to love this place. So every year, we do. I think this is our fourth year. We've done a banquet in the spring. Virtual is not our ideal, but it's in all of our worlds right now, and so we did a virtual banquet. It was fun. We had a box. If you bought a box, you got a box delivered to your house, and it had some percent ice cream and some Lana coffee and some other goodies.
I think.
Yeah, exactly. Taste buds right there. And then we just told some stories of our theme was together. And this idea of how, just like trees are kind of siloed, what scientists are actually figuring out is the roots of trees are actually connected, and they're actually sharing resources back and forth. And when one tree is suffering and needs nutrients, trees actually share. Or if one tree is like getting some amount of toxicity in the soil, it'll share that to lighten the load for itself. And they're back and forth. And that our valley and our city, that we need to be connected. We need to work together. So that was our theme. I shared a bunch of stories around that. So go to our Facebook page. You can watch that. We played a game in the middle that was, again, a fall in love kind of thing. Like it was a Fresno quiz. So you can see how you do on that quiz. And so it's there in our live section, our video section on our Facebook page.
That's great. Well, that's awesome. I think we'll have fun trying to track some of that stuff down. So, as we kind of begin to think about wrapping up, is there anything else that you feel like that we haven't had a chance to really dive into or discuss a little bit more in depth that would be pertinent to this topic, especially around literacy and education in the Valley? Whether that's how we can help, or is it, some of the practical experiences, or is there anything else that would help us in our understanding of this topic?
No, I think like as we continue to learn more about literacy and the roots of like our challenges right now in the Valley, I think what we're just continuing to recognize is these problems are all connected, right? They're all come to a disinvestment in our neighborhoods. They come to a disinvestment in our families. So how do we build structures and systems that allow our kids and our families to thrive? Yeah. If mom thrives, then her son or her daughter will thrive, right? Like, we just got to see that as how do we build a society that creates flourishing for all. So I would continue, just like, I mean, we're going into a season of voting. So how do you use again, we're kingdom citizens. That's, our vote is not our primary focus, but we have a tool in the tool belt. So as you think about this election, like, think about how is the props, how does your votes, how could those be used to create thriving families? Yeah. And think about, like, why are kids not succeeding? Let's ask that question and then get to those roots. So I think I would just say also, like, servant the kids, get involved with us, but then also think, like, how do we think about the systems of our society? And obviously this is what you guys are doing in this series. And so we could connect any of these dots over to any of the topics you're hitting. And some of the core roots are going to be the same. So,
get involved, and where you can, find those places where your passion and your interests can collide with making a difference, whether that's advocacy work or prayer or signing up to be a literary mentor or exactly. So, Andrew, it's been really an honor to get to know you and to meet you and to spend some time with you. And I think that what you guys are doing with Every Neighborhood is incredible, and we continue to want to partner with you and to pray for you guys. And so I know that there's ways to give through your website, and actually my mother-in-law is visiting us right now, and she was brought to tears by your work today. So just put that in the back of your hat, that she was really pleased to see that this is really a heart for people in our community. So
I would just say on that too, like, I'm transitioning in as executive director, so I'm 3 weeks in. Yes. I would just covet your guys' prayers as well. It's a founder transition. That's a big deal. Yes. And Artie is an amazing man, and he's going to be at the Community Foundation, so he's going to be doing really good work for our valley with the Drive Initiative and what Ashley and the foundation's doing. But covet your prayers in our transition as a staff and in his organization. Definitely. So, I appreciate your support, UPC.
And remind us that there's one other aspect that we can begin to continue to learn in this. I think you have a driving tour. So do you want to kind of wrap up our kind of time together by just describing what this driving tour could do for somebody if they've not done this tour of Fresno in this way? Like, what would it entail?
Yeah, I'll put it there so you guys can put it in the chat. But so EMP created a drive tour. It came from many a bus tour we have done, where we've taken people all throughout the city and just kind of said, hey, did you know about this issue? So sometimes it's an issue like homelessness or human trafficking. And then sometimes it was like, do you also know what God is doing? Like, God is doing some amazing things. And through this person, through this ministry, let me just highlight, as we're going through Motel Drive, right? We're seeing prostitutes just sitting in front of the door, and you're seeing poverty and even kids running around while there's prostitution going on. Did you also know Live Again Fresno's been there for the last 5 years, loving on these kids and these families, providing a safe space for them. And so just trying to highlight, like, both issues and then also, like, real world solutions and things that are going on. And so that's a drive tour you could take. I think it's 28 different tracks. You could do it all in one shot or break it up in a couple parts. And we hear really good feedback is just, I didn't know this is happening. And really the focus is loving your neighbor throughout that tour. So, practical ways.
practical ways. Again, showing our togetherness and your work in terms of partnering with and highlighting the ministry and work of other organizations. That's really awesome. So, well, thank you, Andrew, again for being with us. It looks like we got all of our questions in, and I know that you said you've got little ones, and so like a 2-year-old or something.
You may have heard one of them crying there in the background.
That's all right. You heard mine bickering in the background of mine. So it's life, right? It happens. So, but thank you again. And UPC, I know, loves working with ENP, and let's have a little bit more acronyms in between all of these. But, really, we're grateful for you and your work and your team, and we will continue to pray for you and to continue to partner with every neighborhood partner. So thank you again. And
really great chatting. Thanks for the
yes.
time.
All right.